we sat down and literally said, with sticky notes on the walls, tried to add some professionalism and structure to it, but in the end had to say, how long are we going to give ourselves if we want to fully replace our income with passive income?
People want purpose.
Yes, exactly right.
People want a reason to wake up. They don't want to not have to wake up. They want a reason to. And they want to do something where they get recognition and it fulfills them and they're giving back, regardless of the monetary outcome.
And so she and I walked away from our two distinct careers of 13 years. I left mine in 2019. She left hers in 2021. And that came after, my gosh, and you can attest to this as an entrepreneur, AJ, like a journey that you can never really forecast, one where you kind of have to get out the figurative machete and hack your way through challenges and figure it out on the way there.
Welcome everybody to the AJ Osborne podcast. And today I am very excited about our guest. I got Spencer here. Spencer, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Really excited to be here with you, AJ.
Well, I'm excited to have you. Now, where are you out of?
These days live in the Bay Area, California, in Alameda. Not many folks know that name drop, but it's an island tucked between San Francisco and Oakland, to give a couple recognizable names.
Okay, nice. And are you originally from there?
I grew up nearby. I grew up in Redwood City, California, just on the other side of the Bay Area.
Yeah. All right. So Silicon Valley area, you're very obviously aware and familiar with.
Yeah, we did, move and live in Colorado for about a decade. So it's always going to be kind of a second home. I thought about moving back and forth, but we got roots here. I have a couple young boys, the school systems are all tied in and all that stuff and family. So we're here for a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you do active syndications right now. So you are actively engaged and you have an interesting background as a technology executive. So what are you currently doing right now? And then how did you get there, right? You being from the Bay Area, I think obviously that's something that you were probably exposed to or maybe familiar with or understand for a while. But yeah, what are you up to now?
Yeah, living a life that I never would have thought possible a decade ago, AJ. If you're very blessed, I run our investing club called Madison Investing. We do passively invest. That's how we got into all this stuff in the first place. But Jennifer, when I say we, it's not the royal we. Jennifer is my wife and my co-founder and COO of that company. And so she and I walked away from our two distinct careers of 13 years. I left mine in 2019. She left hers in 2021. And that came after, my gosh, I'll just say a journey, and you can attest to this as an entrepreneur, AJ, like a journey that you can never really forecast, one where you kind of have to get out the figurative machete and hack your way through challenges and figure it out on the way there. But certainly didn't start that way. I was in tech for 13 years. I was thrust into like a leadership career across 5 fintech, financial tech companies like Intuit. Most people know QuickBooks or TurboTax. And then progressively smaller startups from there because I wanted more challenges and learning, and I certainly found it there. And that culminated in me working 80 hours a week in an office and not seeing one of my sons for a 2-week period because I was going in too early and coming home too late. And, we can get to that later perhaps, but these are all catalysts. These are the catalysts for getting to this point in life now where, just to share it briefly, like we took 6 weeks last summer to go live abroad in a different country, to live in Portugal with our family and our kids. Never could have done that in a prior life. This summer, we're doing something similar. So it's just a fully different, flipped on its head lifestyle now. As a passive investor who also does some active stuff, pooling capital together and investing alongside folks, it's very different than the household I grew up in. Believe it or not, my dad was a broker, a residential broker for 30 years. He had me working open houses as a teenager. And before that, I was, cleaning out fridges and rentals, and that's kind of what scared me into tech companies, frankly.
Yeah.
And never thought it would be full circle sitting here doing anything related to real estate whatsoever. But now here we are investing passively ourselves with our own capital, invested over 7 figures of our own capital in the last 6 years into self-storage, multifamily, a bunch of the assets I know you appreciate, and just stuff that can cash flow and sometimes stuff that can grow. There's 3 distinct phases in hindsight. If I were to kind of break it down to like how the heck I found myself here is like working full time, went phase 1, bought a local rental, overpaid for it, learned a lot about goal setting poorly. Phase 2 was we got up to 5 single family rentals, long distance in the Midwest. those cash flowed great. They were also very much semi-passive at best. And that was a learning on that one. We sold them since. And then phase 3 was we started buying, so we started investing our own capital into passive LP spots, and that worked so darn well. We leaned in heavy, and then this is when I was still working full time, but I could go in down any one of those rabbit holes very easily because it's just fun to talk about the journey in hindsight. But a lot of challenges, a lot of learnings along the way, and just grateful to be where we're at right now, of course.
Walk me through why, though. Like you're in the tech scene. So what you did, that's what everything else. Now, today, you're Syndicator, right? You're raising capital to invest. You passively invest. You do, those kind of things. But why the switch?
It came, the first catalyst was really, I remember a very challenging period of time I mentioned earlier where I hadn't seen one of my sons. And he was very young. He was like infant at this stage. I was grinding extraordinarily hard at one of those startups in the Silicon Valley lottery, as they say, where you're hoping to get equity, right? You're hoping to get some big exit like Uber, Facebook, Google, et cetera. That doesn't materialize for most people. And perhaps we'll get one of those big exits on one of the companies that actually has that stock still worth something in hindsight. But honestly, for me, I was fortunate enough to get a mentor nudging me into a fintech company, financial tech company that was lending on single family flips. Shout out to Lending Home, now known as Kiavi. I was there brought in to lead originations. I didn't know what that meant. I was like going in as the guy who's, okay, I have to get licensed just to learn what the heck this means. Lo and behold, 3 years later, I had worked with that team, learned all the ins and outs of that business from inside the guts of a lender. You learn what loan to value means. You learn how the mechanics of that works. And I also saw the zeros behind some of these transactions. And I was sitting there going, well, some of these folks are the first time HGTV watchers, good on them. Some of these folks had built these massive businesses, but I can't swing a hammer. So Jennifer is way more handy than me. And I just thank everyone for YouTube every day to fix stuff around the house. So how do I go from here to somehow getting involved, and that was the catalyst moment. I'm sure you can attest to this in your own journey, AJ, but I read 24 books in 18 months, listened to 400 plus podcasts, just devouring stuff. And that was completely over the top unnecessary in hindsight. Learning for the sake of learning becomes procrastination.
Yeah.
That's how that felt for me at that time in hindsight. But eventually I got off my butt, started diving into it, and just really starting to try to find network and understand who can I start learning from in action. And that's when it just made sense. I didn't want to necessarily go and become like a lead operator. I have a deep respect for the folks that do that, such as yourself. But I would say that it came down to, we're not moving into markets that I would want to manage.
Yeah.
We're staying around the Bay Area, we're staying in California for the time being. But we wanted to go figure out, how do we go and, ultimately add value in ways that I know about. I had, thrust into leadership gigs at the age of around 26, leading teams of 200 people. So I knew hiring, I knew partnerships, I knew finance and these things, but I didn't know how to go and necessarily source an incredible deal in Texas, in Georgia, So we had to go out and figure out, how do we want to partner up with some of these folks and do this differently? So that was really the catalyst. And I was working full time, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. That was my work on the business before going in and doing the job, the job before the job. And to just cannot believe in hindsight that it ended up going that direction the way that it has. And it was never the plan to walk away from that career. I enjoyed my W-2. A lot of people tend to go very negative on that. I cherished it, frankly. It was very hard. Yeah. But I have incredible relationships and mentors from so many of these folks. And I wouldn't change it out. I wouldn't change a thing about the career in hindsight.
It's funny. Me too. I actually dislike very much when people rag on W-2s. Very much. Because I'm like, for me, it provided a means for me to grow, to gain mentorship, to gain skills that got me to where I am today. It also provided means for me to have capital, to save, to raise, to do those things, to invest. And so I find it strange, where it's like, I think a W-2, that's awesome. If you can get a job, if you can get a good job, that's great. I'm just on the board with you 100%. I do not like when people rag on a W-2 because I'm like, well, what do you expect? You just expect the world to give you something, and like you should just you hate your job and you should just automatically not. It's not how it works, right? And instead, I think you need to be grateful, put the time and effort into it, make the most out of it so you can do things that you want. Of course, I understand that there's some people that hate their jobs.
Right.
Obviously. Right. Most of those are jobs, not careers. And for a lot of those people, I'm like, you should look at, if you can't get out of it on your own, you should go and look and find somewhere where you can enjoy, but also get the skills that you need to create what you want on your own. So before you just go from here to here, most of the time it's to put yourself in a position where you can learn, enjoy, and grow, because that will help you achieve your ultimate goals. And so I think we do a great disservice when I say we, people on podcasts, things like that, that brag about being on a W-2 or something. I really dislike that. So I like the fact that you really look and see how that part of your journey helped you got to where you were. And obviously it did, how much you understood and what you learned. And so it created and was the catalyst for that. Now, talk to me about what you're doing today. Now, you are syndicating, so you're working with other people and raising money to put into deals?
Correct. Yeah. The ethos behind this started out, as I mentioned earlier, AJ, as just investing with our own capital. And that still is the ethos now. Like, that's the lens. We're LPs, passive investors, limited partners. But then it just occurred to us, like, the questions I would get regularly from folks in my network that are brilliant. So these are software engineers, data scientists, like, senior level executives and marketers who just don't really know that specific space. Yes. I'm not going to get on a plane, fly out to the middle of the Midwest or the Sun Belt in the South, walk a property for 200 units, or just sit there and ask about materials going into a rehab. So I had enough familiarity to go do a lot of that. So they started asking about that. And now these days, flash forward, we've now partnered on over 53 individual deals across, self-storage, multifamily funds, some other niche stuff. Right now, big focus on a need in the market, which is like, I'm investing into like private credit because the banks have pulled back so much. So that type of stuff ultimately is what we're doing now. Just putting our own funds together and investing along folks so that they can get access to stuff they couldn't get access to otherwise, because we can help negotiate terms. And it's a win-win for everybody, done correctly.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing. Kind of my journey. It was, had our W-2, our sales job, right? We worked hard at that. We invested our own money. And then, it got to a point where we'd been investing our money and everything. I was like, well, we can allow other people to come in and join us on it. And that's why we opened it up to other capital. But we started out doing it ourselves. It was, and it became like, well, obviously we have this part figured out. And you're right. It's amazing how just because someone is smart doesn't mean they understand this stuff. There's plenty of smart people, but they don't know who, they don't know how. I don't know how to underwrite a deal. That's not my space. I don't understand the exact forces and supply and demand. I don't understand what drives cost really. And so I don't know. And then too, for a lot of people, like, I don't know who's a good operator. I don't even know how to quantify that.
Right.
So a lot of people are like, I need to invest with somebody, not just straight an operator, because I don't know what makes a good operator. And that is a big deal. That's a big thing. And especially now when there's so many choices. And I've talked a lot to people like, why did you pick that operator? Or why did you pick that person that you're investing with? Like, what was the driving reason and force? And lots of times it's, I met them and they showed me a deal. That was it.
First one they probably saw.
Yeah. At that point, you're betting on the person more than you are even the asset. If you're betting on someone that's doing all the work and has the control, well, then they could even make a good asset be destroyed.
Absolutely.
So really at that point, even if that person shows you a good opportunity and a great asset, it doesn't mean, first of all, they can pull it off. It doesn't mean that they really even understand it. And they may not have a track record or history, anything like that. So you may go, yeah, I understand that this is a good deal, but it will come down to that operator. And that's especially true in self-storage. It's, the operator literally makes or breaks it. And for most assets, it is. And so it's different when you have people that I'm a surgeon, right? I'm this. I make good money. I'm really good at what I do. I'm super intelligent. That doesn't mean I have the connections. It doesn't mean I know those people. It doesn't even mean I know how to evaluate those people.
Exactly.
And so I still could make a horrible decision because I don't know. And that makes those people freeze up. And then they're like, I don't know how to allocate capital, because you hear the horror stories. Oh, I went with somebody and they screwed everything up and it looked so good at the beginning, right? And so I think a lot of people, it's a very important, not only skill, but it's a very important thing that the market needs, is to have someone help other LPs, because we're in a position just where there's so many opportunities and options, and it can get confusing. Because when you talk about investing, you have like the asset, the physical asset, but then you have the structure, right?
Right.
That's a totally different thing. And between operators, those structures don't look the same. And I've had LPs that make weird decisions where they'll make, well, we picked who was giving the highest preferred return. And I'm like, that's how you chose? That's terrifying.
Right.
And it was like, and two, across different assets.
And you're not even getting into the notion of the preferred return doesn't mean a distribution rate.
It doesn't even mean you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Cumulative preferred return, okay, but that doesn't mean you're going to achieve that. That just because they put it on a financial spreadsheet doesn't mean that will even happen.
That's a forecast.
Exactly. And so they can make it look however they want or whatnot, and they maybe don't understand what are incentivizing operators and what are those operators doing and why, and fees and all those kind of things. So the structure itself for most people is so complicated.
Yes.
Because it's not the asset anymore. Now it's a contract structured agreement partnership, which has all these different levels. And now you're talking about things that they may have never even heard of. Cumulative return. What's the difference between an AIR or an ARR and IRR? And two, what is even the strategy with this asset? So all of those things, projected returns, everything else, I always ask people, the one thing you need to know and understand is, how are the returns achieved? So when somebody says, I'm looking at a deal and it's projected to get a 20% IRR, I go, how? And they're like, well, the property. And I'm like, that's not right. Where does that money come from? Like, how does it come from? And most of the time, LPs cannot answer that. And they don't know if it comes because they're going to sell it at a higher price, a lower cap rate. They don't know if it's cash flow. They don't know if it's a refi. They have no idea where the return actually is coming from.
Totally.
Are they going to increase rents? Does it pay for it now? Does it and so they're making a decision off a number that they don't even know where that number is derived from or generated from, right? And most of the time, it's simply just because they don't know.
Right. I mean, you're going to get me going on a topic that I want to go deep into here too. But I'd say that just to even step back a moment, AJ, you're making me think of like, there is one underpinning philosophy that in hindsight now, it guides the way that we educate. And I aim to educate other LPs that are earlier in the journey. It also underpins the way that we look at our own household, our family, how we raise our boys, like the way that we approach philanthropy and like where do we give our own capital to? And that's financial literacy.
100%.
Everything you just mentioned, like that is so key for making a great decision about how do I go deploy $100,000 of hard-earned, hard-saved, hard-invested money.
Yes.
That's a big dollar amount. And so that is at least what, this is not a formal rubric, but like that's ARR, IRR, any other terminology around how to evaluate the performance of one of these opportunities, a fund, a deal, whatever, that's more advanced. It's at least, halfway up that advanced financial literacy curve.
Yes.
But at the most fundamental, when it comes to passive investing, the question I try to remind myself of is, what's the goal for the money? And it sounds so darn basic because I can stare at 100 different investment summaries, beautiful PDFs. I can look at the spreadsheets. I can take a look at the pro forma. But in the end, I still, because I'm a human and I have that lizard brain that triggers when I see a big number and it says, oh, look at that. Oof. Jennifer and I just set this cash flow goal for 2024, using this as an example. If we want to allocate this 100K, we have to go find something with a great yield, a great cash flow.
Yeah. Not
the maximum return. But then suddenly that investment summary from a different deal with the best possible equity multiple comes across my desk. And I'm like, immediate lizard brain triggers. Ooh, that looks so attractive though. So should we go invest in that? And I have to come back to center, ask that question.
Yeah.
What's the goal for the money?
And where are those returns? Like, because you got to compare those things.
Yes.
And the problem is lots of those times those things don't compare. So let's use an equity multiple, everybody, for an example. Equity multiple meaning that they project out, if you put $100,000 in and it's a 2x multiple, right, then you're making 2 times. So let's say that's $200,000, right? But for example purposes here, an equity multiple like in one of my deals versus somebody else's. So if somebody else had, and the example was they have a 2.5x multiple, you only have a 2. And I'm like, okay, but where does the multiple come from?
Right.
What do you mean? The property. Well, it was that they sold the property. And mine does not come from a sale. That means you still have your money and equity in it. So you still own it and your money's still there. So you're getting that on top of that.
Right.
Right? Now that's a totally different number. It's not even remotely the same. And then I also ask, out of that 2x multiple, where is it derived from? It means how much taxes you have to spend. So if it's a sell, it's 2 years later, you have to pay long-term capital gains tax. You also have to make up the depreciation that you took, that accelerated depreciation year 1 that got you that huge tax benefit. Now year 2, you have tax consequences for that. So all of a sudden that 2x return or 2.5 is not. Like how we do it with the refinance, you don't pay taxes on it.
Right.
So you get the 2x multiple, you pay no taxes on it, and you still have the equity, and your money is still in the deal, and you still make. They're not the same thing. So that's one of the problems that you have. These numbers you can place over deals, but it doesn't even necessarily mean it's the same number.
Not apples to apples.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why when I say it's important and why I believe syndicators are important, because for the vast majority of the public, they don't even understand that.
Right.
And they don't even know the questions to ask. Obviously, they don't do it. Why would a surgeon understand that the net number that you take home on an equity multiple that's 2x here, 2x there, how that's derived from, where that comes from, that's not what they do. There's no expectation that they should know more of that advanced side, right? Which is fine. But then the question is you either really need to learn that, you need to understand that, because that has to do with risk, that has to do with actual total returns, what you're really getting, right? So for example, the one that has a sell, where did you get the sell number from? Like I always say, if it's projected on a sell, it means it's made up.
Right.
And I mean, it is. And I mean that if I'm projecting it, because all I'm saying is somebody's going to pay me X. And I think it'll happen because the market has done this. But what we saw over the last 3 years and why I've been saying this forever is it's made up is because those that never turned out.
Yeah, they're forecasts. And it hits with my fundamental principle of there's never been a truly 100% accurate forecast.
No, never.
Ever.
It can never happen.
They don't exist.
No, they don't exist. It's not possible.
Totally.
And so, I often tell people too, I go, people invest with me not for returns. They invest not for because things go right. They invest with me because when things go wrong. That's why. Because if they knew things were going to go right, just do it yourself. So if nothing was ever going to go wrong, buy all the stocks, buy all the real estate, right? Because it's just going to go right. And it is. The reason why you should give it to a professional is because that's not how it actually works, right? Things go wrong. So for me, the more important question is, what happens when things go wrong? What do you do? How have you separated yourself up? What happens when interest rates go up, markets go down? What happens when occupancies drop and rates go up? How are you set up as a company, right? Those things. Because that's why you're giving your money, because they're supposed to be the professional and they're supposed to operate it, right? But most of the time, people don't even look at that. They don't look at what happens when it doesn't perfectly work out.
The downside protection, and so even stepping back before they get to the point of looking at those deals, looking at any offering memorandum, the most fundamental question beyond what's the goal for the money, stepping back further. And I feel like so many folks haven't even taken this critical step, AJ. I didn't. We wanted to cruise right past this as LPs. When we were first getting into the journey, is what's the goal, not just for the money? What's the goal for all of this capital deployment in general? And this is about goal setting in terms of fundamental principles that folks in the corporate world will know. Anyone that's out there who's ever set a SMART goal, that time-bound, measurable, all those good things. Every conversation when I'm getting to know and trying to be truly helpful for a passive investor who's looking at their first deals, I just ask them, okay, no judgment on this question, guys. Can you walk me through how are you thinking about goal setting? Do you have a time horizon? Is there a life event? Maybe that person wants to go and pivot out of their career, whether they're a software engineer who's been at a tech company for 10 years and they want to go and pivot out and be a full-time parent within 8 to 10. Maybe they are a physician, and they're not planning on retiring. They paid way too much in school. They already know that. They're not going to retire from being a physician 30 years early. What they want to keep doing is start building some cushion over time. I mean, probably the third example I'll bring, the small company owner or the third generation entrepreneur, anyone who has their own business and they don't have an exit plan yet, And they're going to get a big windfall if they actually have a successful exit because they won. They did a good job. So all these different profiles have fundamentally different goals.
Totally different operators, investing strategies, everything else. They're completely different simply based upon what they want, what they're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
I think you're exactly right because those things get crossed. Like I tell people, I'm like, I don't want all investors at all. In fact, I always know when I have an investor that wants something else that invested with us that is now going, well, we're like, that was never part of the plan. That's not a good situation. It's not a good situation for me,
right,
nor for them. Because I'm like, that was never a goal. You shouldn't have invested with us if you wanted a quick flip in a year and a half, because we don't do that.
Right.
Right. And so you're exactly right. That is really, really important and probably is the cause of most frustration.
And when I shared that kind of lofty sounding thing that some people are probably going to roll their eyes at the beginning of our conversation today, AJ, where it's like, oh, we went and lived abroad for 6 weeks last summer. We're going to go do it again this summer. This is not coming at the end of some clean cut, oh, we set a goal 7 years ago and nothing wrong happened along the way, right? That's not how that played out. It's taken hard work to get to that point. And a lot of people hear that and they want to get there. But I want to share this brief anecdote. Like the first conversation that Jennifer and I had, we to goal set. I don't know what inspired us to go this hardcore about it. Not everyone has to do it this way. We cleared the whole calendar for a whole weekend. This is in 2016. Had a sitter come and take care of the kids, right? All of that. And we sat down and literally said with sticky notes, on the walls, tried to add some professionalism and structure to it. But in the end, had to say, how long are we going to give ourselves if we want to fully replace our income with passive income? And at first we're like, okay, realistically to hit that number, I think at the time it was like $8,000 or something a month around there. And we've raised it since because we hit that goal already, which we were shocked we did in 5 years. But the first goal that we set was 15 years. Like we said, we were going to give ourselves 15 years to go and hit our passive investing goal. And the reason it was so darn long, because it just crushes excuses, right? Like the quickest way I can weasel out of a goal that I set for myself is give something that's too aggressive and say, oh, let's go retire in 5 years. No, like we had 2 strong careers, great W-2 incomes, 2 separate professionals that worked our butts off to get to that point. How do we go and like realistically set something we can hit?
I could not agree more with that statement, everybody. Mine, same thing. I had like a 20-year horizon because you're right. And I'd always been frustrated, but what I found out is frustrated, not that I didn't meet the goal, it was the time frame in which. So you extend out that goal, your possibilities become wild and you need it because you also need to learn.
Right.
That, like if you have a 10-year goal, what you do in the second 5 years versus the first 5 years will not even be remotely the same. Those second 5 years, you will outperform probably every year what you did in the first 5, just because you didn't know. You have to learn, right? You have to understand because your yield, your maximization, everything gets better because you can adapt, but it takes time. You have to see things go through, cycles go through. And so I completely agree. People have these ideas, oh, in 2 years, I want to be financially free, have all this money, everything else. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what you make in income. What about healthcare benefits?
Right.
Did you think about that?
Not cheap.
Not cheap, right? Do you want to do anything else in life? Do you want to do, it's a way too narrow and I want it now and you can't actually plan. And then even worse, it gets you very discouraged. And then you think, oh, it's not possible.
Yes.
It is, but you had 2 years, right? First of all, even for professionals, that kind of returns and everything, like, don't do that to yourself, right? Because it beats you down and it makes you frustrated. And 2, you can't plan properly because what it takes, the planning, everything, right? It does take time.
Yes. Well, and it takes candor. I mean, and thank you for saying that too about the time horizon. 20 years is a wonderful goal for all the reasons you just outlined. Like for us, we sat there, those conversations, which is most people having these discussions, I would imagine they're going to have a significant other, a partner. If you don't, that's going to be an easier discussion. Still hard, but easier. But we sat there and we had argument, we had reconciliation, we had some tears, there was laughter, and we had multiple cycles of those exercises to get down to the clarity of the goal that we eventually set there. It was incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
And then that's what spat out a certain dollar amount for a 4-digit income per month we wanted to hit and replace in a 15-year time horizon. But we did come back the weekend after that, chop that number in half, and we said, how about 7? And so it was more aggressive, but we still were able to come back and hit that number in 5. And then we revised that years later, exactly to your point. After that first 5 years, we fundamentally shifted the goals, raised them significantly because we had already exceeded. And that all stood on the foundation of be reasonable, like give yourself a legitimate shot at going and doing something differently.
And be realistic about what it's going to take you.
Yeah, but then you got to take action and mess some things up along the way.
You brought up a really good point, and I want to make this clear. I think one of the reasons goals are so hard for people because what they do is they repeat what they hear. And they say, oh, well, I'm supposed to want this. And I'm talking from experience, everybody. Like, oh, I'm supposed to want this. I got in a problem where I thought I was supposed to want financial freedom, as in I just hit the salary and then I go sit on the beach kind of thing, everything else. That's not me.
Right.
That's not my personality. And I had to go through a lot to actually get down to my why and get down to what I really wanted. And the fact of the matter was I wanted to build an empire. Even if I met all my financial goals, it wasn't going to be enough.
Right.
And it took me a long time to be okay with that because I felt like that was something that was either greedy or wrong. You're not supposed to want that. In fact, you should just want to be at home with your kids. And so then all of a sudden I felt bad with this idea that I don't have to work at all. And yet I'm choosing to go to work to build something that I don't need, as opposed to stay home with my wife and kids all the time, because I felt that that was the expectation, or that wanting something different was wrong. The problem is that just doesn't align with me. It's not who I am, right? I get bored so easily. And what I found out doing that, I wasn't going to be happy.
Right.
A lot of times we set goals because it's either easy. Oh, this is my income. I should just replace this. And what happens when you do that is you build incorrectly and you do the wrong things. So when I wasn't trying to build an empire, because that's what I actually wanted, I was building something that actually would never get me to any goals or anything else. I became frustrated. I didn't like it, and I would fail. And so that can be really hard conversations too when you sit down with your spouse and they go, actually, I want you to hang out with us all day.
Right.
And that's something you gotta really sit down and talk about.
But being purposeful like that is so hard.
It's hard. It's really hard. And I think people don't think about it like that because the driving thing isn't a monetary thing. It isn't that. You're getting down to core everything from desires, insecurities to, right? I mean, that's where essentially your goal is coming from. And if you're planning on building something, even if that's just replace your income, it's going to take work. It's going to be hard. And if you don't have it really driven down to the actual whys, you won't do it. You're going to stop, you're going to give up, or you're going to do it bad because it doesn't fit you and work. And I think that simple thing right there, people usually start off, I think you're exactly right, on the wrong foot.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, AJ, because the question that has, I would say popped up and stayed there ever since we hit our financial freedom number is what is enough?
Yeah.
Right. And that this is like, I don't want, we're going to a philosophical place, but I no longer can decouple these two topics. In our household with investors that we work with and help and I educate as best I can, I can't break apart the question of, hey, should I go invest $100,000 or $200,000 into this thing, in this private fund, in this deal? And the other question of, well, why am I doing it? What is enough? How good is your income? And why are we doing all this in the first place? These are all topics I look at as the same conversation, frankly.
Yeah.
And sometimes that just catches people off guard because they're like, oh, I just want to invest for a great return. And coming back to the question of why, and ever deepening whys beneath that, eventually you go a little crazy if you go too many deep whys on that one, but at least take it down to the first couple.
Yeah.
Because you have to. And like for us, my goodness, investing and getting the point that we hit financial freedom ourselves, on the other side of that, realizing I myself don't want to sit on a beach. I thought I did.
Yeah.
And now I firmly believe no one really wants that.
I agree. 100%.
No human being, our brains are not built for that.
Nobody actually wants that. That's something we were trained to believe in.
Yeah.
And that's something that we thought, here's what retirement is. And you go to retirement and people like, we have the Social Security thing. It's an infrastructure thing. And all of a sudden it's become a cultural thing where we think retirement is a goal and retirement means you sit on the beach. And that's what everybody's designed to go work for and go do.
Right.
And it's like, I have to remember, people like, you forget, retirement age was set at 3 years below the average death was. So retirement was never meant to not work.
Right.
The vast majority of everybody would be dead before they retired. It was, if you happen to live longer than you can actually give output, we need to have something, a security blanket. It was never designed, though, for people to do like we do in the United States. Retirement was never designed for that, ever. And it's one of the reasons why we have obviously big funding issues and things like that, because that's not how the system was designed. But it's become a cultural thing. And two, once again, it's not bad if you want it, but I just don't think anybody does. I think if you got down to really the core whys, people want purpose.
Yes, exactly.
People want a reason to wake up. They don't want to not have to wake up. They want a reason to. And they want to do something where they get recognition and it fulfills them and they're giving back, regardless of the monetary outcome.
Yes.
That is, I think, most people's right. They want to contribute to the tribe, be a part of it, be recognized for it, and have a reason to do things. That is not sitting on the beach.
That's right. Purpose, man. You hit on so many words I agree with there. Like the thing that I know on some ears that lands as maybe lofty, maybe delusional for us to be talking about it in that way. I would have thought of it that way 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was too much in it, in the career.
Me too.
Working for something that I'm still very proud of and all the relationships. I'm very proud of having built and hired hundreds of people and led these big teams and all very wonderful experiences. But fact remains, most people will not have a chance on planet Earth, unfortunately, to get to the point to even ask this question because they're so busy trying to get above water in the first place.
Yes.
And so very self-aware of that. All that context in mind, the fact remains, purpose is what makes people feel fulfilled.
Yes.
And I didn't say happy because that's a whole separate conversation on the difference.
Yes.
But I would say that purpose and fulfillment is what is needed. And ultimately, I know I'm getting preachy here. I think that if folks truly sat down and just asked, like, what's the long game here? Like, why am I investing this way I am? Am I investing for my future? Am I investing for a lifestyle? Because on our end, I am not a guy who ultimately wants to build an empire, and that's fine because we have different goal sets, different visions, and every person does, right?
That's great. That's how the world works. If we all had the same goal, the world wouldn't function.
That's right. And so for folks that are out there, for us, like we wanted to just get to the point where we could flip the lifestyle. I was working full time. Jennifer's working full time. Barely any times with kids. Barely time to be present. And now, fitness is not a priority, right? Health is now a priority. Family is now a priority. Work is still very much part of our lives, but it's different and more purposeful, more intentional. The hours spent are deliberate most of the time. And these are things that are actual choices compounding over a series of years to get to that point, and tough learnings and mistakes made along the way. And it's very possible for people to do. But I just want to mention this briefly, AJ, that it's timely that I mentioned my dad was a broker for 30 years, right? When I was growing up. So I grew up getting to see the ups and downs of entrepreneurship life.
Yeah.
Single income, broker is very much as active income as gets.
Yes.
Transaction based. Wonderful lifestyle. Dad was crushing it in the 90s. He was
When
one of
it's
the top
good.
brokers in the country. But then our family hit this period of time we call like the dark decade in our family. Lost my younger brother to cancer. I didn't just conveniently make this up. Today is literally the 20-year anniversary of his passing when he's a teenager. It was a long time ago. Not to go too grim, but like him lost, I think, 3 grandparents within the next 2 years from that, and a couple other folks. It was a rough time, and I bring that up because, like, I watched what happens when that one income moment goes away, right, or at least shrinks significantly for a bunch of reasons.
Yes.
And you talk about leaving a resounding impact. I was in my teens and then early 20s throughout a lot of that, and that stuck with me.
Yeah.
As a parent now with kids and a family, how we approach building a moat around our family for passive income, active income streams, and other ways to diversify. I hope that folks find some catalyst moment in their life, and hopefully not as painful as that one, but some way to take the hard look at, like, why are they investing the way they're investing? And then get into the due diligence that you hit on so clearly early on about, making sure it's the right investment, making sure you de-risk it best you can. But first, go back to the basics. Like, why the heck are you doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
And find the inspiration as needed. But that was formative for us. Why we play, financial offense by investing the way that we do. Why we play financial defense in our household the way that we do. Trying to mitigate tax impact and all that stuff.
Well, it comes down to the point what you're talking about now is you can't tactically execute if you do not know what you're tactically executing on. And you may say, I know, but then how your inner and your outer don't mix. And it sounds frou-frou, I guess, kind of stuff, right? But it's so true. Because if you have to sit down, like I always think about, people are like, you love storage. And I'm like, okay, now it's a metal box that people put their junk in. Let's just be very clear here. I love what it does, and I love being engaged in the activities and the process of executing on it. I do not love a metal box.
Right.
And that's the thing, though. That's the whole point right there. I think a lot of people think I have to love what I do. So, I don't love this. I don't love that. You're not going to love economically. What are you going to love, right? You love outcomes. That's it. You love outcomes, right? Nurses, I'm sure, really don't love cleaning up after people and blood and everything else like that. I'm sure they're not like, this is what I would do on my free time. But they love the outcome, right? They love helping people. And so when I look at that, even like something you guys can do is, my wife did this. She bought me this leather journal. And she said, AJ, this is a financial journal. I don't want you to write about anything else except business financials, things like that, why you're doing it, and record everything else. So I spent the whole first part of it as saying, all right, then why am I doing it? What do I want? And when I say, like, oh, I want to build an empire, really actually what I got down to was it was a whole mix of things, which I defined as security, progress, right, all these different things. But at the end of the day, I said my ultimate goal is progress, meaning that when I end a year, I just wanted to be better than I was when I started it. Because I found that when I ended a year and I was either treading water or I felt like I hadn't got anywhere, I was not pleased. If I didn't make an impact, if I didn't do something, I felt not that I was standing still, but I was actually going backwards. So for me, when people are like, when's enough? And I'm like, It's not. Because the point is not that I'm actually achieving that thing. The point is that I'm better at what I do. So it should never be enough. I should always say, I just want to be better. And what I'm doing is making an impact. It's not that I have storage. It's not even necessarily the money. The money is a tool that we use to make an impact. And so it was, I want to make progress every year on making an impact, no matter what I do. I don't care if that's being a janitor. I don't care if that's anything else. If I could do that, I would probably be happy no matter what I did, because I would be getting better and making more of an impact all the time. And so I would be progressing.
No, that is a brain transplant that I wish we all had a quick way to do it.
It's hard.
It's very hard. Yeah.
I had startups, I had investments, I had ones that were successful I didn't like, I had ones stopped, I had other brokerage firms. I'm talking 8 years of being an entrepreneur and an investor before I really figured this stuff out. And I think you're right. One of the big things is I'd never actually sat down and tried. Like, I'd set down goals. Here's my income, I want to place it. Or all of a sudden one day I'm like, actually, I want a new car, or, which that didn't happen. But the point being is, like, it was like, your circumstances change, and then all of a sudden those goals have to change.
Yes.
When it's based upon just a purely monetary thing. Inflation comes. Okay, well, my number doesn't work anymore. Now I need more, but yet I didn't save anything to invest more. So I see this all the time. And for me, like you said, it's that surface level type stuff. And you can't really be happy or really actually get to an end goal unless you dive down into it. I think it's probably the most important thing people can hear, especially in a time now where markets are harder.
Totally.
And they're like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? What am I trying to do? When markets are going up and everybody's making money, goals are almost always just fueled by greed.
Yeah.
Meaning that we see it, I can get these returns I want. I can map it out. I could become a millionaire, or I could replace my income. This is great because that'll do good things for me. But when all of a sudden markets aren't gangbusters, you really start to figure out, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. Why am I doing it? And do I even want to be doing this?
And ironically, gosh, you hit on so many things I want to bite on, but I'll try to keep it brief. That, like, ironically, the process is the point.
Exactly.
Is kind of the one of the many mottos that, like, gets me back and recentered on this stuff.
Yes.
Because I think back also to when I was leading teams in the corporate world, and if these are teams, whether it's in customer experience or I used to lead some sales teams, it's like clockwork. Everyone that would focus on the result wouldn't get it. The best people who ultimately focused on great habits, on incremental improvement, on daily doing their best and defining the best as failing forward. All of these different things that, sure, without a grain of salt, some people might call platitudes. I still call it a way of living and working. The process is the point. And ultimately, people that would do that, whether it's in the corporate world or whether it's in entrepreneurship, finding a way, like, I am my best when I am focused on the process and finding curiosity and finding some joy even in the process. Yes. And occasionally that means falling on my face in terms of learning something or making a really stupid mistake. But not sitting there and just sulking in it. You got to sit there and say, cool, what happened? Get the root cause, diagnose that root cause, why did it happen, and how to learn from it. And that is truly where I have found fulfillment, but also kind of bringing it back to kind of brass tacks and nuts and bolts for people is like, I think that's at the core of like great investing personally too.
Yeah.
Because in the end, if you enjoy or find some curiosity, more importantly, about what you're seeking to go and deploy capital into, or if you're seeking to go and refine your goals personally about you and your family, you and your spouse, you and your kids, you and your lifestyle, that is quite fulfilling, man. And ultimately, what started for Jennifer and I years ago now, back in 2016, we literally did what I used to think was a very corny sounding exercise of doing like a vision board, doing a ideal day and literally saying, hey, right now, side by side, here's my day. It's full of meetings, like 8 to 9 meetings, 0 free time, commuting in on a bus or a ferry to work in the city, doing the same on the way back, not seeing kids. On the other side, vision B, that's our future state that I want to be at. I'm working on something that matters to me. I'm taking my kids to and from school. I'm getting time in to go work on my health. I'm spending meaningful time with my wife, and I'm getting to see friends more often, which used to be never, and maybe plucking a guitar every once in a while because I like that kind of nerdy stuff. But that is the type of exercise done right, where I think if people take it seriously, you come back to center on the process. And so, whether it's setting a goal for financial freedom, passive income within 5 to 7, 15 years, whether it's saying, oh, I want to go build a habit around becoming a marathon runner, like this is all just finding different lenses on the process is the point.
Process is the point.
Yeah.
And I think an easy way that I look at this too, would you be doing this if not only it wasn't generating great outcomes, but in fact it was opposite? You were fighting and it was working things were bad. Because, I've now been doing this for 20 years. And I can tell you that in self-storage, 80% of all operator syndicators came in after 2018. And as of today, the vast majority of them are gone.
Right.
And the reason is they came in when it was really good.
Right.
And so they came in because there was money to be made. Once that stopped being at the way they thought, or it just got hard, it wasn't as easy, they were gone. And I went through the Great Recession. I went through it. You see it. You see it all the time. It just clears out.
Yeah.
But yet the people that love what they're doing and are interested in the process, they're still there after.
Right.
And they keep doing the same thing. So if you're looking to invest with somebody, you better know, are they in it because they're making a quick buck? And by quick buck, guys, I'm talking 5, 6 years, even 10 years. When you're talking to operators, these are people that have to have businesses around doing this. And these guys, they pop up in these different market cycles. And so understanding what you want and desire is you're going to really figure out who you should be partnering with and who you should be giving your money, because those two things may be dramatically opposite.
Yes.
Right. And that's a tough thing, I think, a lot of times to figure out.
There's a lot of noise. And finding the signal in there is so key now more than ever. But I appreciate what you just said, AJ, about ultimately the team themselves that we invest in, the ones that we get to know, and certainly the ones that we're deploying our capital into now, they've been doing this for a while, and not just a while, years. Many years. And I think that track record stuff that we all talk about, vet the track record, vet the team, that matters now more than ever. But even more importantly, I would say a question or a consideration we have like a 5-part vetting framework we use and I use for our own capital when vetting a new sponsor we're going to potentially invest in. But like clearly at the top of that is track record. But the second one behind that, which is really important, which we've doubled down now on after 2020, 2021, and certainly in the last 2 years now, is what are the repeatable business processes? Like, and it sounds really nerdy and maybe technical. It's really not. All that really means is a great track record can look awesome because of the exits, because of
great bull market. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But ultimately, if I want to go and let's just say pick anything as a hobby, if I want to go learn how to play guitar better, I can't just go pick up the guitar and play an amazing solo from a song that I've never tried to play before. I have to have a process to go and do that. Same thing with any athlete, any sport. If someone wants to get better at batting in baseball, you better believe if they're incredible at it, they've practiced that hundreds, thousands of times on that particular swing. If an operator has great exits, I now very much lean into what is the process specifically to run that business plan that they've done before, and where's the evidence to showcase that they've actually done that and they're about to go do it again.
Yeah.
And it sounds so silly, but I think that, I mean, so basic rather.
Yes.
It's just pivotal, and I encourage folks to just, talk to a lot of sponsors. That is the first question or the first recommendation I make at the end of the call when I'm first getting to know another investor is like, they're like, cool. Well, nice chatting with you. And I'm like, hey, please do me a favor. Go talk to a bunch of different firms. Go talk to a bunch of sponsors. Take your time, because just don't do exactly what you mentioned on that reference earlier for the investor who so commonly just sees one first deal, and that's the one that they go into. That is the opposite of what I recommend. I say, go take your time. Go have those phone calls. It's there will always be more deals.
Yeah,
always. This is a continuum.
Well, with that in mind, man, how do people find you, get a hold of you to learn more about what you're doing, how you find operators and everything else?
Yeah, they can come to madisoninvesting.com. That's just our club website. And they can set up a call with me, sign up for our newsletter. And of course, I would love to just chat with them. This is a non-committal thing, no paid thing. We just want to work ideally and invest alongside folks that are reasonable human beings. That's really what I ask. Is that, as you hit on earlier, AJ, 5 to 7 year hold periods.
Yes,
that's a long chunk of time.
Yes.
So a limited partner is very much still a partner, and I would love to connect with anyone who wants to reach out.
Man, well, love what you're doing. You're looking at it completely right. So everybody can follow those links below, check them out, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience and knowledge on here.
No, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story as well, AJ.
For sure.